Volume 7 C67. Days on the road saw numerous assemblies of the population. The kingdom of Khani's population expanded shockingly close to the kingdom of Nazarick, and a few towns were even springing up. Ainz recalled the state of things when he'd first appeared, village after village destroyed by theocracy soldiers disguised as knights. As a result, villagers tended not to come too close to borders unless there was a fortification to protect them from harm. But there were no forts to be found except for a handful that existed for travelers along the roadways. It was a ringing endorsement of the Wolf King and Wolf Queen's faith in the Allfather, and the result was an eruption in farmland that rivaled the most fertile places in Riestais. For this stage of the journey, Henry's carriage took the lead, allowing her the honor to put the peasants in good spirits, and many gathered along the roads to wave or bow or kneel and pay their respects. It wasn't lost on Ainz how diverse their reactions to the Queen was when she leaned half her body out the window and waved at them with both hands. Her smile was bright and wheat golden hair trailed beside her in the breeze stirred up by the rolling carriage. The peasants whooped and cheered, proving her wild popularity, while the Swords of Darkness rode close by with proud expressions on their faces every step of the way. Even Lucrut, for all his ludicrousness, seemed to have taken things seriously. Ainz noted, but kept his focus on the reactions to, and of the Wolf Queen. She clearly didn't care how they paid their respects to her. She had no sense of royal decorum. Ainz tried to imagine Kalka, or Albedo, or Draudilin or Enna, or even Naya, doing this, and he simply couldn't picture it. But it works for her. He thought of Henry, her youth, sunny disposition, and her obvious love for her population shown through her clear and obvious return of their adoration back to them had paid off in a rare sort of way. Her children might not have her casual air, but for a very long time I think I'll find the rulers of Khani to be very plain-spoken and open-faced people. I think I'll like dealing with them. Ainz reasoned, and made a mental note to put additional funds into trade development with them before integration was completed. A little of their mannerisms would do a world of good for the stiff-necked natures of some of the others. Then maybe I could relax just a little more. He knew it was a selfish thought, but he didn't have it in him to care. Not about that. The carriages switched places after crossing the border, putting the Allfathers in the forefront well before any crowds came into view. Albedo, of course, had her own view on the matter. HMPF, she should have always been behind our Lord, that is where all creatures belong, behind him or beneath him. She had a rarely revealed viciousness about her at that moment which was the opposite of the calm and matronly woman she portrayed herself as most of the time. And in that, Kalka believed she saw a glimpse of the real self beneath the mask. It chilled her blood to see it, and the unspoken question came to mind again, exactly what race is she? The wings made it certain that Albedo was not a human, but with so many races in the world, and perhaps even more in the confusing panoply of the Second World and First World, the possibilities were endless. But that mask-dropping moment provided an answer the Ruble Holy Queen never expected. The All-Mother. She is a demon. A true demon in the flesh. She would still need to ask to be sure. She didn't believe her husband would lie to her about it, but the asking was merely to confirm what the Holy Queen was now absolutely certain of. But how to ask, and how she should act having gained that knowledge, were very different things. Thankfully her husband saw fit to answer. Now, Albedo. Ainz patted her thigh and the demon immediately calmed herself and wore her mask of sweetness and light again. If we give them the little things, we gain the large things. Especially if what we give them increases what we gain. Again Ainz cast a silent thought of gratitude toward the missing queen of the Draconic Kingdom. By now agents and spies and search parties from multiple nations would be scouring the slain theocracy and rushing toward the Elf Kingdom itself. But none would accomplish as much as his own agents, of that Ainz was sure. Demiurge will have set demons to scouting for her. Demons that even the elves wouldn't have a chance at seeing, not to mention the Hanzos. Wherever she is, we will find her. Ainz felt the certainty in his gut, and trusted it enough to relax as he watched the scenery pass. The crowds which gathered began mostly human, and Kalka waved with polite, reserved dignity, as did Albedo and the Allfather. But as they went from village to village and town to town over the next few days, there was a change. Dark elves? Kalka asked. They are former slaves from the Baharuth Empire, brought here to help settle the vast empty lands between cities. Albedo explained without looking away. The carriage bumped a little, and the roads aren't finished yet, but they lay a few miles every day in exchange for certain considerations on their taxes. Paving everything? Calco asked, and Albedo acknowledged her question. Yes, roads are the lifeblood of a kingdom. Good roads mean ample trade and travel. It's how talent moves from place to place, and it makes a kingdom prosperous. In time there will be a single continuous road from the tip of the southern Holy Kingdom, all the way to the most distant border of the Baharuth Empire. Our husband has a slew of plans, nay, a mountain of plans for the reshaping of this world, Albedo said with an almost wild expression as she opened her arms expansively. Plans? Husband? Kalkar asked, and picked up her son to cradle him against her bosom. Her eyes narrowed just a little. What is she speaking of? Project Utopia. Ines answered. Utopia? Kalkar sounded out the unfamiliar word. What is that? In literal terms, the word means nowhere, but it has another meaning. It refers to an imaginary kingdom in which perfect and rational governing takes place, an ideal state. Ines ceased to speak when tears filled Kalkar's eyes. Where everyone will be happy, and no one will cry. She finished the unspoken words of an ideal she hadn't dared to dream of since the day she had to reclaim her capital city from her own angry population. I'd almost forgotten my own dream. Tell me everything, and how I can help make this utopia everywhere instead of nowhere. And just like that, she is his, down to the core of her soul. Albedo thought with a welling of admiration for her master. Though he couldn't rewrite others as he had rewritten her in the final hour, he somehow changed those he touched, and made them his with nothing more than words. How glorious is my lord, and how lucky I am to be by his side. Albedo thought with joy, and the carriage rolled on, with dignified waves to the cheering dark elves who rushed to gain a glimpse of their liberator in the flesh. Volume 7 C68. The journey out of the town went smoothly, in no small part due to the fact that they now had horses. Layali rode in front of Brain on the horse, nuzzling her back against his chest, and when he said, "You try," and put the reins of the horse into her hand, a squeal of childish excitement no different than what he would have expected out of a human girl, left her mouth. "Now this is how you do it," Brain said while he, seemingly without thinking, put his hands over hers and began to talk her through how to control the horse. As the noise of the horse's hooves kicking at the dirt resounded as a steady scratching thump carried on, kicking little clouds of dust behind the trio, she watched out of the corner of her eye. For all her now acute self-awareness about her own foolishness and ignorance, this she could understand in a way that neither Brain, nor evidently Layali, could. She understood it, because she had the same moment. Just like when my mother taught me to ride. Though decades had come and gone since she'd been Layali's age, and the woman she called mother had herself passed away many years before the present, the memory was as fresh as when it was new. She could still smell the grass, the somewhat pungent odor of the horse, still feel the wind and her mother's guiding hand over her own. Some of my last really happy days. If only I'd known it. She reflected, and watched the girl with a mix of envy and pity. So this is how you make them canter. Keep your back straight, Brain said and pressed a hand to Layali's lower back. Head and eyes straight forward, shoulders back, that's how you ride with pride. Layali did her best, though her fingers tightened around the reins maybe more than they needed to, the soft leather scrunched in her little grip. She began to pretend. The empty road was lined with cheering crowds, and herself, she was not a slave, or the doll of some brute, she was Princess Layali, the warrior princess on the way home from another of many victories, and then, gladiatrix Layali, who won her 1000th victory in the arena, riding past her many admirers. She felt her smile grow as she played at her little game. Good, just like that, Brain said to her, if you're not rushing on horseback, you should always ride this way. Never ride in the spirit of defeat, shoulders slumped or looking down. Always look ahead, always straight as a saluting sword. Keep that feeling, never let it go. Brain's voice dropped to a whisper, his breath barely had the power to brush over her ear. That's what the worst will try to take from you if they can. Never let them have it, and you'll always have something, no matter what else they do to you. Brain? Layali asked and tilted her head back so that her eyes were looking straight up into his face. Nothing, just hold on, we're going to go at a gallop now, so lean forward, Brain said, and as he leaned forward, so did Layali, and when they spurred the horse forward, the wind smacked Layali in the face, it picked up her hair and blew it wildly about behind her, spreading out on either side of the adult acting as her teacher. Beneath her when she looked down, she watched the ground become a blur, and the horizon when she looked ahead seemed to both draw closer, and open up to become endless both at once. As she looked in each direction, the distance shrinking, the way ahead growing, Liana cursed her own cowardice. I want to tell him I want to stay. I don't want to be left behind. I want to ride forever. And the thunder of the two horses went on. Skana and Liana sat opposite one another at the table in one of the private offices of Nazarick. Our lady's cunning knows no bounds, Liana said with a wiggle of her ears. Skana twitched her own in turn, a little game between the lovers that they'd played since Skana's return to life, but the words of Liana were as true as they were serious. You're not kidding, sure there's nothing wrong with a little covert work. But you just don't get the same experience. And those morons are letting us basically wander free. We could map the place down to the last blade of grass and say it's because we wondered if Draudillan might have been turned into the roots beneath it. Skana snickered with a bit of malice as she got into her work, sorting out one piece of material after another. Arrayed in front of them both, those materials were lists. Lists of important people, lists of homes and residences of those people, maps of villages and towns the dispatched agents of the Kingdom of Nazarick were already compiling. The Doppels put under the command of Albedo's agents had explored not even a tenth of the landscape, but they were like bits of sand blown out of the palm to scatter into the wind. Each place they landed, they were just one among many, and in their search, however earnest it might have been in truth, they picked up more information besides, all of which was being compiled for later use. Skana's quill flew over the paper as she transcribed key details, boiling down masses of information into key points, while her lover took a more leisurely pace about it all. When Liana noticed the almost frantic pace of her lover, she reached a hand across the table and covered the ink-stained fingers with her own. Relax, she said, and when Skana looked up at her and away from the paper, Liana smiled a little. There's no reason to hurry, you're not a human with the lifespan of a mayfly, you're an elf, and according to our mistress, the time for bringing the theocracy down is at least 2 years away before we even begin. Maybe 4, depending on what they do about the demi-humans. It won't fall even 1 day sooner if you work yourself to death. Skana let go of the breath she didn't even realize she was holding, and a little silvery laugh followed. It's funny, I never worked hard in my life until I met Lady Albedo, or you, and now that I've started, I can't stop. You're right, I should relax a little, we'll get it done. She stopped when Liana squeezed her fingers a little. It's all right, I understand. Their time will come, we just can't hasten it, like water carves a channel, slow, steady, and constant, and we'll cut our way through to the end. Are you sure you're not just trying to get me to conserve my energy so I have more to spend on you tonight? Skana winked a bright green eye at her mate, and Liana looked straight at her when she replied. I'm doing exactly that. And with thoughts of the night to come, they returned to work. Volume 7 C69. The second of Queen Draudillan's maids to die, died in the arms of her queen. I tried. The maid whispered as Draudillan dragged the woman's limp body down the long hall, her feet on the smooth wooden floor squeaking steadily until it drew the attention of some of the Elf King's other attendants and they emerged out of the rooms where they worked and came to assist. The queen was so focused on the limp frame of the barely aware maid that she was unaware of the others until 3 elven women hefted the injured maid up at her legs and shoulders, and began to carry the woman back to the common quarters themselves. Thank you. The draconic queen whispered and scurried after them, taking her servant's hand as the seemingly mute elves did what kindness they could. I know you did. I know, and it's all right. The queen whispered as close to the woman's ear as she could. Just what the woman meant, the queen had no idea, but it didn't matter. Reassurance, no matter what it was for, was all she could offer to her people anymore. Her dress, a gift of one of the elf maids, was a pathetic and patched-up remnant of what was once very fine clothing. It was also practically pink after constantly being washed from being stained with blood. The dress was loose around her waist and allowed her easy freedom of movement, and sleeveless, which was unusual, but the practicality of it became obvious after her many times doing what the women in the Elf King's harem referred to as field care. When they lay the woman down and Draudillan made to step away, she felt the woman's hand grab at the hem of the queen's new clothing, and the descendant of a dragon lord could only turn to meet those empty, hopeless, wild eyes again. I tried. The maid mouthed again. I know, Dylan whispered. I'll get water. Clean you up. It will be. The queen opened her mouth to speak, and it became a scream as the maid rolled herself over, and by the power of pure will, gave a stumbling rush to the fireplace, braced herself, and bashed her head against the stone. She fell back, the head wound spraying a red rain out through the air to arc across Dylan's face and clothing. No! Not another one! Not another one! The queen shrieked and rushed to at least try to arrest the maid's fall, for all the good it did. Fetch the healer! The queen wailed and pulled the maid's head into her lap. The elves in the room rose to their feet, but none of them made to leave, nor did a guard rush in. Are you deaf? Go and get the healer, Dylan cried. Hold on. Just hold on. I'll take care of you. The queen commanded. I forbid you from dying. You're sworn to serve me. You're not allowed to die on me. Please. Don't leave. The queen's voice began to dim as the maid's disobedient dying continued unabated. The royal fingers, bloody and slick, slipped over the injury and she tried to pinch the gaping wound closed. Why aren't you helping her? Dylan looked up and around as the elven women slowly surrounded the pair, and began to sway side to side, and hum a mournful dirge. Close to Dylan's side, the pregnant elf whose name Dylan could not bring herself to ask, and who had not offered it despite their time together, placed a hand on the queen's shoulder, and quietly sang. In the Eversummerlands where no cruel touch abides, a seamless world where no woe betides, where maidens' dreams of love grow strong, and there never is a morning song. Rest ye angel, to freedom fly, safe in death, in thy grave, lie. The queen barely registered the rest of the song as she came to understand. A death ritual. An elven death ritual. The queen realized as the spraying blood became a trickle. They hummed onward, their lyrics sung again, and again, and again. I can still save her. The queen thought, even if they won't. She made to rise, and the elf concubine's hold on the draconic royalty tightened. She's not dead. The queen shouted, spittle flying from her mouth as the elf women went on and the flow of blood began to diminish as there remained less and less to lose. A puddle of crimson spread out over the floor, rapidly expanding to the size of a small rug. Will you take her freedom, child? She could bear no more. Now she is free. This was her choice. It is the choice that many make when they can bear no more of our king's cruelty. Honor her choice, or force more suffering on her? The elf asked, and Dylan's lips curled up in a snarl of defiance until, as she darted her face up to the elf, she saw a river running down her eyes that were a mirror of the queen's own. You are one of ours, so is she. This is all we can do. Nobody can defeat the king. Except her way. She beat him. And now she is safe. The elf woman whispered, and then moved her hand away as the tension fell away from Dylan's body. She is still here. Will you send her away without your voice to guide her to the land of endless summers? The elf woman asked, and Dylan began to sway back and forth with the others. The few human women who could rise, joined in the ring, and even those who could not properly move again, rocked back and forth where they lay. First Dylan, and then her maids and court ladies, picked up the lyrics as best they could, and uninterrupted, they sang their sister to the afterlife, never stopping, not until the maid's blood stopped flowing and her heart stopped beating, and her victory over her tormentor was complete. When it was finally over and the last note faded, the queen said to the ones who gathered, "Thank you. But we also have customs. We cremate our dead so that they can't be devoured by beasts. Denying our own monsters their victory. It sends them skyward, away from all harm found here down below. Will you help me gather what I need?" "Of course, little princess. That will be easy." The matronly elven woman stroked Dylan's hair as if the queen were merely another child among many. "I hope so. I'll send her to the gods. And hope she is received," the queen said, and lowering her nervous, fearful hand to the still wide eyes, she steadied herself, and closed the eyes of the dead for their eternal rest. Volume 7 C70. The elf woman was true to her word. Please let this work. Dylan thought as she stood in the rear of the estate. The survivors of her party and her unexpected comrades were gathered around a pyre of stacked logs constructed crisscross with a wide gap beneath. In this way the air fed the fires, and the height of the burning material, which elevated high enough that in her adult form the body would have been at chest level, ensured that the flames would shoot higher than any cook flame. She held a torch in her right hand, Born of the dirt of the world, we ascend to the sky and escape all things that would harm us. The queen projected the power of her status in her voice, clear and unbroken. She wavered not a bit in her final duty to her subordinate. One thing the queen had added, however, which was not part of their rituals. The cloth wrap was streaked with pitch. The sky was mercifully clear and the day's warmth was mild. Not far beyond the walls of the estate she could hear the hustle and bustle of the people of our winter who passed their days unaware that a living hell existed within arm's reach of them all. The queen touched the torch to several loose straws that would draw the flame deep within the pyre, and then shoved the torch underneath. The flames roared to life almost instantly, and the queen waited. Please let this work. Please. She thought again, clasping her small hands in prayer as the smell of wood began, and the flames caught the pitch-tainted wraps, and the body was engulfed in flames. A roar went up that was redoubled from the first light, and black smoke rose, slowly reaching toward the sky where it would surpass a dragon's flight. Arch and Sabos told me that they were regents in our winter, close to this very spot before the war began. Even if the Allfather isn't here yet, there's no way someone isn't paying a mind to what happens in the capital when the entire empire is on the line. Somebody will be watching, somebody will see this and wonder what is happening. All I need is for them to watch. If they just watch this place, I can get a message out. Draudilan's thoughts ran faster than a wild horse, and she bit her lower lip hard enough to draw blood, watching the fires rise, listening to the crackle of breaking wood and trying to ignore the pungent, foul smell of burning flesh. It wasn't for nothing, even if she didn't know it. The queen told herself, "We are getting out of here. All of us." She looked around at the various women, elf and human alike, and said again to herself, "All of us." Raymond's carriage fell behind the others by design. He departed hours after the other monarchs did, and when he left in silence with no ovations or honors or interest in them at all. His only company other than his array of hidden knives was a bottle purloined from the place he stayed, which would no doubt be tacked onto the invoice sent to his embassy. The carriage clattered along, and he could only rest his cheek against his fist, and his elbow rested against the edge of his carriage window. He looked out the window from the corner of his eye to watch the scenery pass. His mind drifted like a leaf in a slow-moving river, aimless and without direction of its own. A few things, however, he could not avoid. Is she okay? He wondered about Zeshi. The girl was utterly lost when it came to anything to do with reality. That's our fault. She can't even make a campfire, not unless she remembers the things her mother taught her. And that's our fault too. His carriage carried him onward, racing at a swift pace that kept the scenery changing, which was a small blessing to have as it kept him from turning an eye to the bottle nestled beside him on the thickly cushioned seat. It was large and green with a fat body and a long neck shaped like a swan's neck, curving to a downward curving neck, and a small bottom side the size of a dessert plate. It was also more tempting than it should have been. You're just depressed. That's not what drinking is for, the cardinal told himself, but he couldn't keep from worrying. Zeshi is the strongest being in the world. Or was. But she's also a young girl in her body's terms. A sheltered girl who lost her mother. Damn it. The more I say it, the more we sound like. Raymond didn't care for the direction of his thoughts, and so he turned his eyes away from the bottle one final time, refusing to look at it and instead focusing on the scenery, sweeping through village after village with barely a pause. But oh, how his pulse raced and demanded that he pause. Are those? He asked himself, and he couldn't deny his eyes. There were goblins tending the fields beside humans, and skeletons bearing water or swinging hose up and down in an endless, tireless cycle. Instantly the urge to rush in and slay the monsters rose to the fore, destroy the skeleton, protect the human. But time took its toll on his impulses, and instead, he pressed his face to the glass and watched with disbelief. It's one thing to see it in a city when there are guards to keep order, where there is power. But this is a village. A village. Not a sword to be seen. The former Black Scripture regent had seen men and women crack before in the field, strong, mighty figures, champions of humanity with the potential to grow even stronger. And they cracked under the weight of the atrocities they were compelled to commit. A goblin tribe fleeing enslavement by orcs. Slaughter them to the last infant. A vampire hiding itself away that hasn't harmed anyone. They may someday, so they must die. An elf who slew their master and escaped to try to form a rebellion. Rebels against order were not needed in the theocracy. I was so proud of myself. Pushing through my doubts. Pushing through everything, doing my duty. Washouts and failures. I couldn't hate them, but I was so glad I wasn't one. Raymond thought as he raced past, watching as a goblin accepted a water skin from a human farmer before distance put the pair out of sight. Fluke. It's a fluke, he told himself, but unwilling to look further, lest he witness more flukes, he grabbed the red velvet curtain and yanked it shut, plunging the interior of his carriage into, if not total darkness, then into a dim red light which washed over everything within until the sun set and the carriage driver knocked on the door to say, "We have reached an inn, master. Would you like a room?" Raymond looked outside the door of his carriage. The driver's cropped ears caught his eyes. "You're not the driver I had yesterday?" he half asked as he looked past her and toward the two-story wooden building. "I had a young boy?" "Yes, master, you did. The embassy sent me instead. I was acquired by your butler, and sent after you shortly after you left. I arrived yesterday with instructions to act as your personal aide." The elf replied, her back stiffened ever so slightly, and at that, Raymond felt his lips turn down a little. "Why?" he asked, his hand tensed around the neck of the bottle. The elf's face was the neutral mask he'd seen on slaves since birth, but now he wondered, what lies behind it? "I have only the butler's word, but if it pleases you, master, I can put together what I heard and what I was told into an educated guess." The driver's feet inched a hair farther away from him. Had he not been of the black, he might not have noticed it in the dim light, but it was there. "Go on," he said as he looked the driver over. "Master, the day I was purchased, I could hear your butler say he needed to buy someone completely broken in. And the day I was dispatched, your colleague, I believe the master's name was Dominic, instructed me to be dispatched immediately so that no human could be infected by heresy. I believe that I was dispatched because I will stay silent, refuse nothing, obey you completely, and not have any beliefs of the six tainted by foreign ideas." It was all said with stiff formality, enough so that one would think she bore no resentment toward his kind at all. "And are you?" Raymond ventured. "Master?" the elf asked, cocking her head. "Broken?" he asked. She sank to her knees then with her eyes downcast, holding the carriage door open with her back. Though she winced when she did it, it was otherwise a seamless motion. "To nothing, master. Nothing at all. I will obey. I ask only that you do not hurt me as I do my best to carry out your will." It was said as if she were announcing the time of day, with not a single break in her neutral face. "Dominic." Raymond rolled his eyes. Of course he would be the one. Then a thought came to mind. He furrowed his brow. By chance, did the boy who drove before make mention of informing the others of the fact that I was now traveling alone? The woman paled. It didn't occur to me to ask, my lord. I didn't know you had a companion." Her neutral mask broke a tiny bit as her lips quivered, but there was no other sign but that and the color draining from her pretty, sharp-featured face. Raymond waved it off, letting out a sigh. "No, it's fine, you couldn't know," he said, though privately thought, that will not go over well. Then he glanced at the inn again. It was rather larger than he expected it to be, with a large stable off to one side. "I suppose I should stop for the night." He let out a long, slow yawn, which the elf did not repeat, though she bit her lip to keep it back. "Go ahead and stand up," Raymond said without looking at her, and stretched his legs as she rose. "That was a very long ride. But if you're going to be with me the rest of the way, it will be awkward to just refer to you as girl or slave the rest of the way to our winter. What should I call you?" "Master can call me what he wishes," the woman replied, and unbidden, she went to the back of the carriage to take down a large suitcase, which she hefted on her shoulder with surprising ease given its size and weight. The boy would have struggled with it, Raymond noted, and cracking a smile he said, "I think what he wishes is a tad cumbersome. Just give me your name." The elf stopped dead, and looked at him for several seconds before cracking the ghost of a smile. "Master jokes," she said, flatly, "but if he wishes my name is Nua." "Nua, then," Raymond replied, and asked, "Why do you not put that on your back? It would be far easier than on your shoulder." The elf woman's neutral face returned when she said, "If it is master's wish." She then tossed the bag up just a little and snapped her arms out in time to catch the straps onto each shoulder, and carried his luggage behind him, suppressing the wince as she walked.